We come now to the next speaker, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Abhijit Iyer-Mitra of India. He works as the program coordinator at the National Security Initiative of the Observer Research Foundation, ORF, India's premier think tank. His work focuses on military nuclear dynamics in South Asia, as well as the impact and dynamics of technology on militaries, bureaucracies, doctrines, production, and supply chains. In addition, Mr. Iyer-Mitra assists with the West Asia program focusing on Islamic theology and ethnic identity in the Muslim world. He is a syndicated columnist writing on defense and international relations for the Mail Today and Daily Pioneer, two national dailies in India. He holds a master's degree in international relations from Monash University, Melbourne, where he also taught strategic studies in political Islam. And he will speak about the problem of India and Pakistan. Please.
So this is such a vast topic. I'm going to ask you to keep 4 caveats in mind when I narrate the rest of my story. The first is India-Pakistan is an incomplete equation. It's actually India-Pakistan-China because the deterrence equation in South Asia works as a triangle. It's not a bipolar equation. The second is that in South Asia you have something called the instability-stability paradox. So the more the tactical instability, very counterintuitively, the more terrorism you have in that sense, the greater the strategic stability, the less the chances that people go to war for a very complex variety of reasons, including external diplomatic intervention. Third is something that a British working for the Indian Civil Service in 1952 called Ivor Jennings, he wrote this paper. He also wrote the Constitution of Pakistan. And his prognosis of partition was that the net result of partition wasn't that India got the Hindus and Pakistan got the Muslims. It's that Pakistan got the army, India got the bureaucracy, and they're going to hang around their necks like a hangman's noose. Very accurate. And the last caveat here, the one date that everybody keeps repeating is 1998, which was when India overtly nuclearized and Pakistan followed suit a few weeks later. It's a bit of chaff and flare there because it's probably the most strategically irrelevant date in the South Asian nuclear calculus. So keep those 4 facts in mind. Now, there are 3 relevant date ranges. The first is 1971, the second is 1986-87, and the third is 2007 to 2009. Why? In 47, when we gained our independence, you look at the 3 big powers that in some way or another, either maritime or continentally, surround us. The USSR, USSR, China, which was then somewhat under Chiang Kai-shek, and America were with us. They supported us in every way. We had very good relations with China, very good. Even when Mao Zedong takes over in 49, we still have very good relations with them. And this continues right up to 1962. 1962, when our border dispute with China boils over and the Chinese, we claim, invaded us. They claim they didn't. We invaded them, apparently. Anyway, so in 62, when they invade us, you see this equation where the USSR remains neutral, which for us was a big victory, that they wouldn't come to the support of their fellow communist ally. They remain neutral. America supports us. They want to send us bombers and fighters and whatnot to defend us. And China is the one that's against us. 9 years later, 1971, when we go in to liberate Bangladesh, because of the horrific genocide that's happening out there, that entire equation within 9 years, the strategic calculus changes. America, which was willing to supply us and in the final analysis come to our aid, now sends the Pacific Fleet against us to threaten us, not very unsubtle nuclear threats against us, colluding with China, and what we face is complete continental encirclement. So if you look at a map of India, Pakistan is against you, China is against you, and America is trying to maritime encircle you from the south. Not a nice situation to be in. And it's under these circumstances that we decide to go nuclear, which finally happens in 1975. Now, this wasn't the only reason. There were also internal political reasons and a whole host. I'm not suggesting monocausality here, but the main strategic driver was what happened in 1971. So you go in for what's not a weaponized explosion in 1975. And weaponization doesn't happen because your concept of deterrence at that point is very esoteric. Hey, we've got a nuclear device and it's going to deter people. How exactly it's going to deter people, we haven't worked out. We don't want to work out. We don't want to know about this. Fast forward now to 1986. 1986 is a momentous date because that is when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi gets final confirmation from Indian intelligence that Pakistan has in fact weaponized. And this sets off a whole series of chain events. First, he orders the weaponization of the Indian nuclear arsenal. He puts about this plan called the Rajiv Gandhi Disarmament Plan, which is almost stupid. It's childishly naive because it's basically everybody holding hands singing Kumbaya and the whole world is going to give up its nuclear weapons in 5 years. Not going to happen, but it's done for a very specific reason. He wants to put a maximalist position to the world. When the world rejects it, he says, hey, my hands are tied, now I've got to nuclearize, and he gives the orders to nuclearize. These initial devices, very crude, very big boosted fission devices to be latched onto our Mirage 2000s. Our Air Force doesn't even learn how to drop them till 1995 because the rotation during the takeoff phase is something very, very difficult given the size of this. The second aspect of this is repeated American threats to India not to intervene. At this point, they're supporting terrorism in Indian Punjab, a huge insurgency situation there. And India can't respond militarily because America says, tut, 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 you're not touching Pakistan. They're too important to our game in Afghanistan. So what happens is, in the end of 86, December 86, we launched this major military exercise called Brass Tacks. About 800,000 troops, hundreds of aircraft, ships, what have you, in the Rajasthan desert. And there are two reasons. The political executive thinks that this is to force Pakistan to overtly weaponize. The one thing that was giving America the shield up to that point was, hey, Pakistan may not have actually overtly weaponized. This was an agreement. You read lots of American literature on this, that the non-proliferation standards for Pakistan had slipped. They just didn't want overt weaponization. So in a sense, it was a gambit to bring out overt Pakistani weaponization. But it turns out, now we know with great certainty, that there was also a plan to actually go into Pakistan. And this was a plan that the army had developed all by itself without actually entirely keeping the political leadership in the loop. Very, very important decision. So the existing civilian distrust of the military is actually significantly exacerbated by this event. At the same time, you have the Ministry of Defense, which, using American tables developed during the Cold War of tactical nuclear strike, comes to the conclusion that tactical nuclear strikes don't work. They simply don't work against armored columns. There is no way you can make it effective. So two reasons combine that India first gives up on tactical nuclear strike, and it gives up on first strike or any means that would give any excuse to avoid delegation of launch authority to the military. The military at this point, the army specifically, not the Navy or the Air Force, the army is not to be given launch codes under any circumstances. And this becomes an issue. So what happens in 86 is Brass Tacks is then followed by a very aggressive position on the Chinese border. And that happens exactly, we believe, after the first three devices were actually tooled and weaponized. Intelligence tells the Prime Minister that the Chinese are going to test a device, a proxy device for the Pakistanis, which turns out to be their June 5th Lopnor test of a 250 kiloton device. We now know with the benefit of hindsight that this wasn't the device. The actual proxy testing for the Pakistanis happens on 26th May 1990, which was an 80 kiloton device. In private conversations with the Pakistanis, they've told us that this wasn't actually a Chinese device. This was an incomplete French design that they managed to get off the market, and the Chinese helped them sort of jerry-rig it and make it workable and so on and so forth. So that's what happens in 86. But from 86, what happens is, and this is where I disagree with you, Professor Evron, 86 also sees a huge spike. This is the real date when nuclear deterrence sets in the subcontinent. It also sees a huge spike in the insurgency in Punjab. The death figures go through the roof, civilian deaths and military deaths. And slowly, within about 3 years, an insurgency starts in Kashmir. Now, cumulatively, if you look at Indian deaths from 1986 to the next watermark that I gave you, 2008, we lose between 67 to 81,000 people, troops and civilians in Pakistan-related terrorism in Punjab and in Kashmir. To put that in context, 67 to 81 is more than the number of people killed in Nagasaki, and possibly more than the number of people killed in the initial blast at Hiroshima, possibly. And the number of military casualties is about 17,000, which is more than enough for conventional wars previously, including the ones with China. So 47, 48, 62 with China, 65 again with Pakistan, and 1971 again with Pakistan. And this warps the military's mind. They actually start thinking of nuclear war that's fightable. They think of how many people can we lose realistically to win a war in a tactical nuclear strike. But I'll get to this later. How we resolved this problem of subconventional warfare under the nuclear umbrella was purely by accident. We didn't even realize it would have this effect, and that happened to be the 3-tier barbed wire electrified fencing that we did across the 3,000 kilometers of border. So in 2007, 2008, and this is the second watermark, 2007, 2008, once the construction of that barbed wire fencing is completed, you see Indian casualties because of terrorism just drop dramatically. So from 2008 to now, we've had less than 300 casualties. On the other hand, you see Pakistani terrorism figures go through the roof. From 2008 to 2015, they've lost 55,000 people to terrorism. So what this did, and 2008, the Mumbai attacks was actually a blessing in disguise. They used a tactically brilliant move for strategically non-existent gains. I mean, what was the point of sending these 11 people to kill Indians? Are you showing us that this is a weakness? Great. We sealed that within about 1 or 2 years. And so you now have a land border that's secure against subconventional warfare, a naval border that's secure against subconventional warfare. Where do you go? It internalizes all these subconventional nut jobs, terrorists, let's call them for what they are. It internalizes them in Pakistan, and they really start wrecking the Pakistani state. Today, they've wrecked Pakistan. Pakistan is on the verge of being a failed state. Now notice, the nuclear weapon had nothing to do with this, but the Indian nuclear weapon wasn't aimed at Pakistan. It was always aimed at China. Pakistan we could always take care of. The Chinese we couldn't take care of. So now let's shift to Pakistan, what their point of view was. When they went in for tactical nukes throughout a period from 2000 to about 2007 to almost till 9, in these track 1.5 and track 2s we used to do with them, they used to keep threatening us. You know, these TAC nukes, they're actually suitcase bombs. What if one of them accidentally on purpose falls in the hands of a jihadi group and goes off in, say, Bombay? And towards the end of about 2006, you keep having these reports of the American Plan B, the seizure plan, when all of a sudden this narrative changes. Even in the track 2 discussions that we have with the Pakistanis, this narrative completely changes. They're now tactical devices. They don't call them tactical devices, they call them short-range, low-yield devices. And that's very much the existential dilemma. It's something developed for subconventional warfare, and its use is now reinvented for a tactical nuclear strike. Second thing that happens is, like I said before, the cost-benefit of Indian war planners changes completely. We're willing to accept significant military losses. And the strategy that evolves, now cold start, you probably have heard of this, is one supposedly crazy thing where you send armored divisions broken down into armored brigades into Pakistani territory, shallow sallies inside Pakistani territory. What was more critical about Cold Start, even though Cold Start's been discarded, this particular part hasn't, is something that the Russians use in Stalingrad, hugging the enemy. You send armored brigades to basically circle around Pakistani cities in the hope that any tactical strike will cause more Pakistani civilian deaths than it will kill Indian soldiers. And you're willing to accept a certain level of deaths. Now you'd say, I mean, this would sound really crazy. I mean, what are these guys thinking? This is what we've been telling the Indian military for a very long time. Are you people stupid? These are Indian troops you're talking about. You're looking at losing about 3,000-4,000 troops. And they said, well, no, the Pakistanis aren't going to do anything. And surprisingly enough, I don't know why this is, I can't draw causality. In the war games that we've done with the Pakistanis that the Americans conducted, specifically Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, the nuclear laboratories do these war games, the Army's assumptions have invariably proven right. I don't know why. In the first war game in 2012, we established Pakistan has 4 thresholds, an economic threshold after which, if it surpasses, they will go in for a strike. We crossed that threshold. We imposed a naval blockade on them. The Pakistanis did not strike. In the second one of our armored brigades actually goes and captures a Pakistani nuclear device, a tactical nuclear device on the battlefield. And the Pakistani leadership's response was, you know what, this actually strengthens deterrence because, hey, now the Indians know. The Indians don't believe we can miniaturize. Now they know we can miniaturize. And at least it's not falling into the hands of a terrorist. So good on you. In the third one, which was last year, we went in for airstrikes. Because the Indian position is that we don't care what kind of a warhead is on the missile. We're going to take out any transporter, erector, launcher we see, and if a sympathetic detonation happens, that's your problem. We took out one. One of them did actually have a sympathetic detonation outside a village called Faridkot in Pakistani Punjab. 50,000 Pakistanis die. And the Pakistani response, they don't even want to mention it in any of these statements the next day. And it's very important to note what constitutes the Pakistani delegation to these war games. There are people from their strategic plans division. There are people from their military, some of them all retired, none of them serving, obviously. Strategic plans division, military, and the ISI, which is their inter-services intelligence, which we think pretty much controls Pakistan. It's a bit more complex. I'm losing the nuance here a bit. So I may think that my military are a bunch of nut jobs, but clearly these exercises seem to validate what they've been saying. So the net result is that Pakistan, if it was seeking, if it saw nuclear weapons as giving it security against India, it's actually lost its security against a whole spectrum, right from subconventional up to nuclear against India. Has it made Pakistan more secure? Emphatically, no. What holds back India, on the other hand, is India's industrialists, our population, and the way our political system operates. People tend to analyze India through the English press, and the English press is the most singularly useless, irrelevant part of Indian public opinion, because in a country of 1.2 billion people, no more than 8 million people actually read the goddamn English press. The real Indian press is the vernacular languages and the Hindi press. So I'm half Tamil, half Bengali, and after the 2008 Mumbai attacks, if you look at the Bengali papers, if you look at the Tamil papers, by day 2 there was no coverage of Mumbai. It was as if there was a pub brawl in Belfast, and the thing is, yeah, they're Irish, they're always drunk, screw them. That's that. There is no coverage. If you look at the Hindi press, it's a bit more so, because the Hindi vernacular are the northern states that face the brunt of being the borderline states with Pakistan. It lasts for about 2-3 days, but there is absolutely no correlation between the Hindi press and the English press. And this is very, very important, because this is where you have members of parliament, and especially industrialists. What happened after Mumbai was you had a whole bunch, Ratan Tata, Mukesh Ambani, India's big, big names, going to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, saying, look, have you thought of the opportunity costs? We lost 180 people in these attacks. How many more are you going to lose? How much, in economic terms, are you going to lose by going in for a war? So that is what acts as a check and balance on the system. And let's not forget, Indian industrialists fund all the election campaigns of all these guys, so they bloody well listen to them. Now, coming back to where this leaves India, India now is stuck in a limbo. We've kind of, not exactly, but kind of sorted out some problems with Pakistan. But we're still stuck on two ends. One is that we still don't have a working deterrent against China, and this deterrent is viewed in esoteric terms. What are you going to deter against? We don't expect a large land invasion from China again. On the other hand, if that invasion happens, we're still very army-centric. We're still stuck in pre-digital warfare, pre-information warfare, pre-revolution and military affair, military paradigms. We still think in army terms. We haven't moved to an air-centric paradigm of warfare. So Chinese infrastructure in Tibet, if you're an air planner, this is your dream come true. It gives you so many aim points, you've got choke points, you can destroy them from the air. From an army point of view, this isn't. This is a Schlieffenplan sort of thing happening out there, and you've got all these bizarre phantoms that you create in your own mind. So you've got army paranoia on one hand, whereas the Navy is being seen as because it's the smallest and least threatening, the least politically influential, it's being seen as the future of deterrence against China. But deterrence against China still hasn't bought us peace of mind, precisely for this reason. So I'm going to finish there, and we can deal with other things during the Q&A if you want.
Thank you very much.